let's talk about it.
Hello, and welcome back officially to Thicc Radio, the podcast where we talk about gaining and everything in its orbit. I'm James.
I'm Tim, so let's get it started.
Tim, we're
Yes.
officially launching season 2!
Oh, I know, right? A bit behind schedule, but it did happen, finally.
Listen, season 2, do you know what? I actually think we are right on schedule. I'm a very big believer in everything in its own time, at its own pace, in its own space, and I think that now is the right time for us to be here and doing what we do best, which is talking about, as the tagline says, gaining in everything in its orbit. So it's been that year already, really, since we started. How does it feel to officially be kicking off season 2?
I'm just amazed that we kept this going, because whenever I talk about the gaining perspective, which is the one that I tried to do on my own, the episodes came out so infrequently that I was like, everyone's going to hate me because there's no consistency to this posting schedule. And, you know, me being naive, not realizing how much effort goes into creating a podcast, like I just have to hand it to you for being so ridiculously organized, because if it wasn't for your OCD, this wouldn't happen. Like, if it was left up to me, an episode would come out like every 6 months. A year might go by before another one comes out.
I mean, you know, if we let's take a second to reflect on that for a moment, because when we first decided to do this, you know, I'd actually approached you about joining on as a co-host for your podcast, which I will be honest, I enjoy the episodes that I heard. Obviously, I noticed that the posting schedule wasn't really regular, and I was thinking, ooh, he's gonna like me because I know that I can contribute this. And, you know, it ended up working out that we made it as a new project that is, you know, the two of us together, its own thing. And I honestly think that was just how things were meant to be. It really feels like everything came together in the right way when the first season kicked off. And I mean, if I can ask, from your perspective, the gaining perspective, you could say, how does that experience differ, you know, creating this project with me versus how was it creating it on your own?
Creating it on my own, you know, I obviously had to, if I wanted to have a guest, I was gonna have to reach out to them and, you know, ask them, hey, I'm doing this thing, you know, do you want to do this thing, like guest spot on it? I was literally handwriting outlines out. Like, I wasn't even typing them. I had a notebook that I was writing things down. Sometimes I took it to work with me, and if I thought of something, I would write it down at work. Then I would record, and I was recording through Anchor. Like, I wasn't using Zoom, I wasn't using Skype, I was recording everything through Anchor, which when I noticed that it had that feature, I was like, oh, this is cool, you know, I'll just do it through this and it'll be like a one-stop shop. Well, not everybody has Anchor. So then if they wanted to speak on the podcast, they'd have to download the app, and technology can be tricky even at the best of times. So, you know, sometimes there'd be lag, sometimes there'd be echo and reverb and all that stuff. Like, this has been a much more polished version, because I didn't even really edit my episodes. Like, I would get about halfway through editing one and I'd be like, oh God, I'm so fucking tired. And I'm just, whatever, fuck it, I'm just going to post it. And I would publish it half edited. So, like, if you listen to the first like 2 to like 4 episodes of the Gaining Perspective, they are rough. They are so rough. I tried to add in music in some places and it wasn't really working out. And yeah, this is a much more polished and professional product, and I'm very happy that it is, because if this was like the Gaining Perspective, I feel like people would be like, you know, you guys ought to give up because it's not really working.
I mean, I don't think it was that bad, but I think I knew from the beginning, because, you know, I knew that I wanted to do a podcast because, of course, before the podcast, I was doing big boy chats on Instagram, and even after the first live stream, I had people in my DMs saying, you know, you need to do a podcast. This is too good. We need more of this. And so by the time I'd approached you, I knew that I wanted to do something that was very polished and something that was very specific, because, you know, when I reflect on things made by gainers in the past, it hasn't always been that kind of nicer product. It's always been a little bit crunchy crunch. And listen, people do the things that they can do to the best of their abilities, and this is not trying to shade that in any way, shape, or form. But I feel like when I think of my love for this community and my love for gaming and what I want to do for it, I would never want to do it half-assed. I would want to give my whole ass. And in fact, not just my ass, my dick, my legs, my torso, my limbs, my brain, my mouth,
And
every
especially
part.
the belly, especially the belly. You left out the most important body part.
The most important part, the belly, bitch, the belly. I'd want to give everything to a project, and maybe that comes from like a performer's background, like whenever I would do a musical or a play, I could never just rock up, do my lines, and leave. I had to character build, I had to world build. If I was confident in singing a song, I wanted to challenge myself on strengthening those notes. I would want to find ways that I could improve it because I have to go out there and tell you that I am the shit. How the fuck can I do that if what I am giving you is bullshit?
I see, and this is where I felt like I was at a distinct disadvantage because, and I remember bringing this up to you in the beginning, was like, are you really sure you want me to be the one? Because I have actually mostly half-assed things. Even in my civilian life, like when I did the boy dance group thing, I half-assed my way through that. I've pretty much half-assed my way through most of the stuff that has gone on in my adult life. So I was very apprehensive about like, are you sure you want me to be the co-talent? But actually doing this with you, forming the friendship that we have, I realize now that like it's not necessarily that I'm half-assing things, it's just I'm just being me, and the fact that you wanted this and all of my neuroses and all of my forgetfulness and all of my everything to be your partner in crime has really meant the world to me.
I knew that I, not to be all like sexually sounding here, but like I knew that I wanted you from the moment I laid eyes on you, because and no word of a lie, when I did Big Boy Chats, it wasn't because I was like, oh, I specifically wanted to do Instagram. It's like I knew that I wanted to do a podcast, but the guy who I'd lined up to be a podcast host had kind of gone AWOL, and I was like, well, I don't really have anyone, but this is a thing I can do on my own, and I can manage that, and that's fine. When I finally came around to deciding that I wanted to do a podcast, the first thing I was going to have to do was find a co-host because I'd listened to podcasts where it's someone talking on their own, and to my mind, it is the most banal, boring, asinine, frustrating bit of audio that I have to listen to. I fucking hate it.
Well, because it's almost like listening to a TED talk, which,
Yeah, but
not to shit on TED talks, but like it's very different to watch somebody do a TED talk as opposed to just listening to it.
yeah, TED Talks are at least a little bit more dynamic. So, yeah, I just knew I didn't want to do it on my own. So when I finally came around to deciding, oh, I want to do a podcast, I knew I needed to find a co-host. And I cannot remember for the life of me who it was I said this to, but they were like, oh yeah, that guy, the belly growth, he's got a podcast. And I was like, what?
Oh, that was back when I was using that name. I forgot that
Way
I've
back.
been Thiccy now for so long. I forgot that was my name.
Yes, man, back in the day. Yeah. But that's what led me to you. And then I saw that you were actually creating something. And so to me, it wasn't about the quality of the product. It wasn't about any of that. It was about the fact that you showed up and you were at least trying. And if there is one thing that you and I have seen out of this experience, it's that shit doesn't happen unless people put the work in. So truly, the only reason this podcast has had any kind of anything going for it is because you and I work, and we work in our own ways. Yes, there are times when I challenge you and push you with my own sense of type A categoryness to do things or do more things, but I also think that that's been at a fine pace for you. I think that's been good for your own creative development based on the conversations we've had.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I feel like it's been good in that experience. And reflecting on this past year, I think we certainly started off at a certain place for season 1, and now we're at this place for season 2. And it's amazing how much we've grown, changed, learned, and progressed. Like, fuck knows where we're going to be by season 3, but
I mean, sorry, I completely had like, I am so tired. I'm sorry. I'm hoping
pardon
that
me,
by
I've worn her out. She's not ready for this. It's all
No,
like,
it's just no, I've been functioning on like 3 hours of sleep a night because I've been doing the second shifts. But what was I going to say now? I'm hoping that by season 3, because we both have really big dreams for our lives and this product in particular. So I'm hoping that we've, like I said, I want to have a production company. So maybe by season 3 or 4, who knows? But
gosh, can you imagine? Thicc Radio becomes Thicc Limited.
that's the dream.
But then, of course, we would have to call it like Thick Un, because then it would be Thick Unlimited.
Oh, thicken instead of thickum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the pun. Thick, like unlimited.
Yeah.
Like the potential for what we can do is unlimited.
So James, I wanted to know, because you're the the person who looks at these things more often than I do. So like Anchor gives you a lot of stats about where the podcast is being listened to, the type of viewership. So can you run through the actual stats from the Anchor website?
Sure. So, according to Anchor, and I'm going to read out some numbers here for everyone. So, we have had all-time plays, as in the number of times that episodes have been played, 14,000 plus.
Wow.
So,
wow. I was not expecting that number.
So, like 40 plus episodes, 14,000 listens. And, the demographics for that is really spread across quite a large number of episodes, because they also show us like, what are your top episodes? What are they sort of ranking at? And, most episodes tend to be averaging out around about the same number of listens. I think some tend to dip down, but I think that's to be expected. People aren't going to listen to every episode, and you, dear listener, I'm sure have also not necessarily listened to every single episode. If you have, please feel free to write in and tell us what you think of the product as a whole. But, if we broke down the demographics, we've got nearly half of all listeners are on Spotify. About a third listen to us on Apple Podcasts, and then the rest listen to us on a mixture between Google Podcasts, web browsers, and an assortment of other platforms, which is pretty exciting. In terms of location, like where are our listeners based? About 70% are based in the US, 10% are based in the UK, and from there we've got varying degrees of Canada, Australia, Germany, and Ireland, ranging between 1 and 5%. And then at around the 1% mark, we have quite the list. We're looking at Switzerland, New Zealand, the Netherlands, Chile, Mexico, Luxembourg, Sweden, France, Brazil, Spain, Austria, Belgium, Portugal, Finland, Puerto Rico, Singapore, Poland, the Philippines, Russia, Ecuador, South Africa, Ukraine, Israel, Romania, Norway, the Czech Republic, Malaysia, Iceland, Italy, Paraguay, the United Arab Emirates, India, Benin, Indonesia, Turkey, Denmark, Croatia, Morocco, South Korea, Lithuania, Sri Lanka, Argentina, Cyprus, Greece, Panama, the Republic of Lithuania, Latvia, Hong Kong, Vietnam, Taiwan, Kuwait, the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, Kenya, Colombia, and Bahrain.
Good Lord. Are there any countries that have been left out? Like,
wait, I'm gonna do
are we literally in every country at this point?
I'm gonna do a quick count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
I mean, that's amazing.
61 countries, that is.
Wow.
And there are 193 countries. So we're in roughly 1/3 of all countries on Earth.
That's insane. I never expected that.
Gender-wise, we have a predominantly male listenership at about 90%, about 5% female, 1% specifically non-binary, and then 3% non-specified, which I think is pretty cool. In terms of age, we have 21% of listeners are between 18 and 22, 31% of listeners are between 23 and 27, 30% of listeners are between 28 and 34, 12% between 35 and 44, 2% between 45 and 59, and a surprising 2% under 17.
If this podcast has helped even one person feel less alone in this fetish, then I feel that I've done, good work with it.
I mean, that was the whole premise of doing this in the first place. Like, we recognize that the conversation point on gaining just isn't there. And this is something that we've made and that people share in, which I think is beautiful. So I want to ask you, Tim, what do you think listeners can expect to be different this season?
Well, I think there's going to be more episodes where it's just you and me, because we didn't do a whole lot of that. Like, beyond that, I mean, I'm just hoping that we go into even more topics, and maybe we get hyper specific on some topics. Maybe we circle back and revisit topics we've already talked about and do a more in-depth dive, because we are sort of a 101 for gainers. I would think like our podcast would be considered like introductions to concepts, but then we can always go back and do a deeper cut. So we might do that. Honestly, who knows what the future is going to bring. We're just sort of playing by ear. We're going beat by beat, and we're seeing what sticks to the wall.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see the feedback from people. And again, we'd like to encourage you listeners, if you have any thoughts for us, feedback, suggestions, write in, let us know. You can reach us at thiccradio@gmail.com. Best way to talk to us. But I think season 2 will definitely be different. Like you say, there's going to be more of us talking one-on-one, which we always got good feedback about. And because we just wanted to show as many different diverse people in the community as possible, we never really made that a feature. But looking at a lot of the episode concepts that people are starting to bring up to us, episodes on things like being gamers or episodes on lurkers, those are things that we can just talk about from personal experience. And yeah, so that's probably what we're going to do. It'll probably just be me and Tim for some of those things. So yeah. But if you're out there listening and you think we could do a deep dive on a subject and contribute, if you think that you would make a good guest, again, reach out to us at thiccradio@gmail.com and we'll go from there.
So I wanted to ask you though, is there anything that we didn't do in season 1 that you want us to do in season 2?
Because we would do these live streams on Instagram, I was kind of thinking, is there a way that we can merge that with the podcast a bit, and create a more cohesive product for people to listen to? And then I was watching an episode of the Red Table Talk on Facebook and got inspired. Why can't we do our own round table? Why can't, instead of Red Table Talk, why don't we do Dinner Table Talk? And have a fucking round table discussion about different gainer concepts, because we mostly only interview people as like a sort of one-on-one basis, well, 2-on-1, whereas this sort of round table setting could be upwards of 5, maybe even 6 people, Tim and I to moderate, and then a really diverse collective of people from the community to share their thoughts, feelings, experiences, and carry on the conversation themselves. So that's something I'd like us to do in season 2.
So kind of like The View, but for gainers.
The View, but for gainers. Which one?
Or maybe The View is a bit dry, so maybe more like Cracked After Hours, but with gainers.
Ooh, yeah, Cracked After Hours. You're the girl and I'm the neurotic guy. Because you're full of sass and I'm just like, no, wait, yeah, no, yes, no, yeah.
Are you talking about the guy with glasses, or are you talking about the blonde?
The guy with glasses.
The guy with glasses, yeah.
Yeah, he's a bit more neurotic, and I think that.
Well, and I've noticed that you two share similar thinking patterns.
I mean, the thinking pattern where it's like I went, like normal people go A, B, C, D, and I went A to G and just kept on skipping.
I'd say that's a pretty good, it's a pretty good summation.
That's a good summation. Good. Well, let me throw it back to you. Talking about what we could do in season 2. Like, where do you see the podcast by the time we hit season 3?
I know it's a pipe dream, but I'm hoping that we've branched out into some kind of production, whether it be our sort of like cheesecake gainer porn porn, for lack of a better word. It really wouldn't even be porn, but the kind of like specific gainer content, um, that you've moved to America by then, and that we live in the same city, and that we can actually do this in a studio as opposed to over the
Yes.
airwaves, the ether. Um, so let's just hope that everything works out that way. We've got another year, so
We'll see where we wind up. A year is a long time. A lot can
that
happen.
indeed. So, James, over the last season that we did, we mentioned that there's like a lot of running themes to the episodes that keep coming back, like
Oh yeah.
respect and managing expectations and stuff like that. Will there be, do you think we'll have any different themes this season?
I hope so. I think what was really interesting in reflecting on these like recurring themes that just kept seeming to like crop up again and again and again was just that they seem to be indicative of where we were as a community. It's really starting out with the basics, managing those expectations, respecting everyone one step at a time. And I do kind of hope that we'll have some themes this season that maybe center in on the importance of things like mental health and looking after yourself. I'd like us to circle around to themes of community and support and outreach, maybe even mentorship, though maybe that'll be like a season 3 theme, who knows. But these themes weren't things that came around because we were like, ooh, let's be clever and have like overarching themes or something. It's more just we would sit down with people with, as you all heard, wildly vast and different episode concepts, and somehow we would circle around to these couple of similar themes, completely unintentionally, completely naturally. And I don't know, I am curious to see what'll happen in season 2. So, Timbo, we do have a listener question that someone had submitted, which reads: It seems like you've both known each other forever. How did you two meet and how did the podcast begin? Well, we've kind of already.
We sort of covered that.
Well, yeah, we did.
Yeah, honestly, we did. But I mean, the thing about us seeming like we've known each other forever, we just clicked, and in the very first time that I spoke with you, I felt a certain kind of kinship. I often compare our friendship to my mom's best friend and her. They have a similar kind of thing. Like they just clicked right away. They've been friends for almost 30 years at this point, and it's just you're just a good Judy. And and then when we actually got to meet in person on the boat, because I remember you said that you were a little bit worried that like, oh, what if we don't actually click when we're in person, because it could be very different, like speaking over a Zoom call as opposed to being in the same space. But you rushed up, you gave me a big hug, cracked some jokes, I laughed, we sat by the pool, we just started talking right away, and like it was just I mean, literally that trip has been the best week of my life probably ever. So
if I put a spin on the listener question and maybe think about like what my first impression of you was, like I did get the impression of someone who was very laid back, someone who just wanted to hang, someone who wanted to have cool connections and not stress too much about things. And obviously I was a bit worried that me and my sometimes not chill vibes, sometimes not chill James, constantly not chill. I was worried that my general vibe would send you waddling for the hills like fucking get out, you psycho. But we when we talked about podcast stuff, sure, we were both down to do the work, and that was great. And then, of course, it was in those in between moments when we were doing research for episodes, or just trying to do some looking up guests, or waiting for the recording to start, and we would just chat to each other, and we realized that we had a similar sense of humor, or we realized that we watched a lot of the same TV shows and had the same references, and we realized we just had this thing in common, which it wasn't just our humor, it wasn't just our references, it wasn't even just our goals, but it was just you're like a soulmate. You
agree.
You are a soulmate for me.
We talked about how we both watch and how we were like, oh, are we going to be like Katya and Trixie? And then we quickly came to realize, no, we're actually going to be the Eddie and Patsy, because that's what we are. We are Eddie and Patsy.
Chain smoking, drinking Bolly Stolly right from the bottle, drink driving, getting arrested, ass first out of the car, But even in our drunken stupor, still stumbling to each other's aid, like, as my friend, leave him alone. What are you doing?
However, James did have me watch a particular thing on YouTube that was like, okay, this is actually more correct. Like this, if this was us, this would be. So it was the Vivian and Monet exchange, and I was like, okay, you are the Vivian, and I am Monet exchange. Like,
100. And it just brought me so much joy because they were both such ridiculous characters. Like, they didn't even need to try to one up one another. Like, Monet was clearly angling for the whole I am sassy and I'm gonna give it to you. And the Viv was just like, ugh, I'm British and I'm a little bit fancy, but I'm also from fucking Liverpool and I will shank you. 100. And I do feel like that is very much my vibe at times. Like, I'm well put together until I'm not. Then I will kill you. That's
and
good.
I'm laid back for the most part until you piss me off.
I have seen you once or twice get real in your feelings. That shit's scary. Whew.
It's the cancer. Like, I swear to God, cancers, we are, for the most, like, we get a really bad rap. Cancers get called crybabies and like over emotional and like, unstable and indecisive and whatnot. And yeah, okay, so we have like moments where that happens. But like when it comes to cancers, we are for the most part evenly keeled until you piss us off. And then it's not a hurricane, it's not a tornado, it's not a thunderstorm, it's a fucking tsunami. Like, we will just crash into you, and like, it's better to just run, like, just head for high ground.
Yeah. Run. That's fully the vibe. So, wrapping up this episode, this is our welcome to season 2. To everyone listening, thank you for, being with us this whole time. And to anyone who's new, thank you for joining us now. Thank you to everyone bearing with us. Thank you to everyone for listening and being a part of this.
Absolutely. Thank you all for being patient and waiting out the premiere of season 2. Thank you for the support. Thank you for the feedback that we get. Thank you for taking anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour out of your day to listen, because without that, it would just be us talking to each other. It's this has been a labor of love for both of us. We both have full-time jobs, we both have relationships, we both have households. There's a lot of things that we have to get done, but we really love working on this. When we do this, it's not work, because we're both very passionate about it. So the fact that you all have come on this journey with us really means more than we could ever articulate.
100%. For all the love that Tim and I have for each other, that continues beyond the project and it goes into our own lives, and it's a wonderful friendship, and that's great. So how is this podcast different to just our straight up friendship? It involves you guys. It involves every single one of you by participating, by listening, being on the show, sending in your feedback, sending in everything that you do. And it really does mean the world, If I can share, just as we wrap up, one story of someone who...
Well, you do that and then I'll share my story too.
Yes, please do. One person who reached out to say that they were one person who reached out to say to me that they had struggled with body image and with body dysmorphia and possibly with an eating disorder, which involved fingers and throats and just not pleasant things that for them came about as a result for a desire to gain that, because they felt so alone and so weird and different to everyone around them. They felt that that was the way to cure it, the way to try to fix themselves. And it was from listening to our podcast that they felt at peace with themselves and messaged me to say, for the first time in a month, like a month had gone by since they last had done it, the first time, it was the longest that they had not basically forced project to vomit in over like 4 years. That was the longest period of time that they'd gone without it, and that they were eating and that they felt so good about themselves. And that was obviously a message that made me feel very emotional, because it was evidence that what we're doing is valid, and that loving yourself in your gaining journey can have a positive effect on your mental health and on potential disordered eating and things of that nature as well. So For me, that's just a message that I got as a thanks for the show that stays with me.
Every year in Cleveland, I've talked about this before, there's an event called Claw. It's a leather convention that happens. It just happened a couple of weekends ago, actually. And there was a gainer presence at Claw because there was a class on gaining and encouraging. I was the co-host of it. And it was the very first night. It was a Thursday night when the party officially kicks off for the weekend. And I was standing there waiting for some friends to show up. And a person came up to me who I had seen, I think, before on one of the social media apps, but I had never actually spoken to this person. And they came up to me and they go, you have the podcast with your friend, right? And I was like, yeah, that's our podcast. And he just goes, thank you for making that, because we needed it so badly. And like, it's helping me understand more about who I am, how I feel about things. Like, I can't thank you enough for creating it. And it was just so sweet to have someone come up and say that to me. You know, I really wish you could have been there so that we both could have, you know, but you were there in spirit, you know.
Trying not to harass you on your weekend when you were busy being fed and surrounded by gainers, vicariously living through everyone's Instagram posts, just being like, oh, this is why I want to move, because things are happening and I want to be a part of it. And but that's another reason why we do this podcast, is to be a part of it. And sometimes you see people sharing experiences on the newsfeed on Grommr or on Instagram, and you get that FOMO, that feeling that you're missing out because you live where you live and that you're not a part of the story. You're not a part of the world changing things that are happening. And maybe this podcast is a little way that you can feel like you're a part of that journey too. So we love you all. We think you're amazing. Thank you for listening. And that's it for another episode here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave a good review. If you liked this episode, this podcast, or just us in general, share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok at thiccmouse. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Anchor app podcast produced by Stannnum and Thiccy Mouse.
Mixed and mastered by stannnum.
Our artwork is provided by Lokitu.
Our theme song is provided by Body by Cream.